Hi, Dianita. How are you? This is Claudia Cero. Today, December 29th, giving you the last feedback on your paper. I do hope that this 8th version becomes like the last feedback that you will receive for this report. As you can see, it is a lot of work from your side, from my side, and now let's say that it is up to you to actually consider all my recommendations. Dianita, initially I want to tell you that I want you to reread the whole paper, since I have been including some new sections, let's say new comments, as I, let's say, went to the conclusions or went to the data analysis, so I have to go back to initial parts. Do not forget that based on the changes, this section should be readapted according to the changes and according to the results and according to what happens in the document, according to what happens in the document. Okay, in general terms, Dianita, let me just go back to the rubric, and based on that, you make your changes. So again, as I'm telling you, you try to reconstruct your abstract and try to see the millions of models that you probably can see in the Intellectum site. Do not forget that generally an abstract is short, that it presents the topic, that it has to present what happens in your research, what kind of research was it done, and probably the results that you found. So try to find the best model for you to follow so you can follow it. Regarding the APA style, I encourage you to make a final revision. I found a lot of problems in your report, especially when you have those long citations. Let me see if I find one, because they are becoming very extensive. Maybe like this: 2012 as cited in PAPs 2001. So according to this, the reader doesn't understand whether this citation comes in 2000 or comes in 2012. So I guess that there is a mistake in citation in this moment. This one, 2011, as cited in Caban, 2012. Generally, the citation comes as cited in Cabanot and Song 2011. But I encourage you to make a revision on these citations. In copyright, I think that I detected some sections that I don't know to what extent they are actually copied or pasted, or you forgot the citation. So it's better that you make sure that you are accurate. So plagiarism, because you are using some expressions that are not yours, some illustrative scales to write a test, or in this one, case of this new way of learning, it is plagiarism because we can't find the exact, let's say, section that you found. So make sure that you correct that. Probably I only found 3, but probably there are more of these sections in the report, so it's better that you pay attention to that. Language, it's in general terms, what I checked was in red, in yellow, so you will see a lot of highlights, red and yellow. That means language problems. Probably I skipped some of those language problems, so my suggestion is that you actually pay attention to singular and plural in general terms. Pay attention to subject and verb agreement. Pay attention to the structure of the sentence. There are some crazy structures that are not clear. Problems like punctuation signs that are, let's say, breaking the sentences. Things like these are in general terms what I found in your research. In the references, I call your attention to make sure what you actually want to use. If you want to use a table, a bibliography, or a references page. So I send you these resources for you to check, so you will actually know what the difference is and whether you want to have a reference or whether you want to have a bibliography. Now going to the test, it's important that you remember this rubric so you can actually see what exactly each section is about and what are the elements of these sections. I found particularly some problems with the theoretical framework, with the research design, pedagogical intervention, and data analysis. It seems that you are kind of confusing them at a certain moment. Remember that your research question is the one that is going to be actually the one that will guide your research question. So in your research question, we don't have something like research question. Okay, so in your research question that I adapted a little bit, that research question, it's important that you actually pay attention to what you want to say and what you want to keep the coherence of the document. So there must be a heading that says research question. Research question. Okay, here it is. So I readapted the research question. So my suggestion is that you read the document to actually see that we are talking about the same elements. It says to what your hypothesis is to see to what extent students improve their grammatical accuracy when writing short tests after they receive video feedback in a virtual learning environment. Here it's important that you always refer to grammatical accuracy because that's the one that is kind of calling for your research. The other one is writing short descriptive tests, video feedback, and virtual learning environment. So it's important that you keep these names, these words, and you keep repeating them. What I saw is that you are changing the issue of video feedback by screencast. And it's important that you make sure whether you want to call it screencast or whether you want to call it video feedback, when is it pertinent to call it video feedback, etc. As you can see, we have a good number of screencasted, and I also see that you have like different ways to show video feedback. Sometimes it is separated, sometimes it has like a slash, like a hyphen. So make sure that you keep like the same let's say expression along the test. Okay, so that is research question. Going back to that research question. Okay, good. And the other one is a virtual learning environment, or call it virtual learning environment, so call it a virtual learning environment. I also changed the verbs for the objectives to demonstrate and to analyze, and make a little bit of changes in this part. So my recommendation here is to analyze the effectiveness of video as a feedback strategy to improve A1 undergraduate students' descriptive test. So it's very important that you make use of this. If this is the research question, everything has to be organized in the same terms. So grammatical accuracy has to be first, descriptive test has to be second, video feedback has to be third, and virtual learning environment has to be fourth. Everything has to be exactly in the same order. So if we go to the theoretical framework, if we go to the I don't know, the data analysis or the conclusions, everything has to go exactly in the same order. Remember that the theoretical framework is just to provide us with definitions. What is grammatical accuracy in terms of writing a short descriptive test? I would call it short, since your students are just writing just some words. So make sure that you actually added this along the test. I have a general, let's say, issue with your test because they are not, some paragraphs are just 2 or 3 sentences long, which interrupts the idea and does not develop any idea. And the other problem is that we see that you are including a lot of citations, but we don't see Diana. So the question is, where is Diana? And so don't abuse of these direct citations. Do not abuse of direct citations, because sometimes it breaks the idea and it's difficult to know whether you're speaking about you, about your research, etc., etc. Okay. What else do I have to say? My general recommendation is to delete the abbreviation DTS, because it becomes tiring, boring, and it's not needed. So let's call it descriptive test when it is necessary. So I just felt that it is better for your report. I found particularly a difficulty in the pedagogical intervention and in the data analysis. So remember that the pedagogical intervention is exactly when you have to show what happened, and how, what were the stages, what were the steps that you actually follow. So don't forget the rubric. So it seems that you are confusing and you are repeating what is in the pedagogical intervention in the research design and data analysis, etc., etc. A general recommendation that I see now is, remember that you explain a graphic, a diagram, a picture before you send the readers to the figure or to the graph or to the table. Avoid unnecessary spaces, because those are words, so avoid them, unnecessary spaces. So if it is necessary, continue with the next test and the image will be in the next part. In the pedagogical intervention, my recommendation is that you make a lot of emphasis on your videos, and if it is necessary, that you use like a video and you analyze the video and you include the section. So that is your strategy. So that part actually needs a lot of support, and it's probably as you did here, but you have to analyze the audio feedback that you actually use for your students. In the section of data analysis, I have a problem because it is not clear for me the participants. You are talking about 300. The present research had as participants, the total population in the course was 300 students. But for the study, simple volunteer qualitative sample was considered, since according to Hernandez, only some individual, etc., etc. So this is an idea that was interrupted by a citation, and still it is not clear how many participants. So one can have the idea that you are talking about 300 participants, but later on you talk about 10 groups, and later on you talk about a certain number of students. So it's difficult to understand. So make sure it is clear that you're talking about a definite number. I guess that is going to be this 49 that will appear along the paper. I had a little bit of difficulty with these tables that you're including, the percentages, etc., etc., because, well, I found something that is not clear in them. So try to think about your reader and see whether they are clear. In the ethical considerations, I suggested, like, for example, include some theoretical support, and that also, according to the appendixes, that make sure that everything is said here so you don't repeat it later on. This is the pedagogical intervention, and is the one that I consider you are confusing with the procedures of data analysis. So you said that there was a diagnosis stage. Probably here is complete word, like diagnostic stage or diagnosis, because in this moment it's an adjective and it is incomplete. Delete these periods because they don't add anything there. Then you go to the implementation, and it's a very short stage. So my suggestion is that this one is the one that has to be the most important section, the most important to show what you did. So include